Yo, let's go live tonight. Going to be with Coach Safe. I'm going to put him in right now. Coach Safe, Dalton State men's soccer. All right, so we're going to have Coach Safe in here again from Dalton State men's soccer, and actually women's soccer as well. We're going to be discussing a lot of key points, but again, I got my college recruiting. He's actually had two guys go pro at from Dalton State, so he's going to talk about that here in a little bit in the process, how that works. Zuli, tudo bem? So if you guys want to learn more about college recruiting, I'm going to ask him the big five. So there's going to be a bunch of questions about the 5 key things about college recruiting. Let me get him in here right now. Hold on. Be talking about college recruiting and the 2 players that he had signed pro right now. And he should be joining any second. He's in the chat. There he is. There he is, El Jefe.
Hey.
What's going on, boss?
Hey. How are you?
I'm still recovering from a 4-day work week of packing and moving. So it's been a blast.
Yeah, well,
how about yourself?
Yeah, congrats. Yeah, all good. All good. Living the dream one day at a time.
There we go. That's all it can be, right? That's all it can be.
Why not?
So I want to, people are in here. I want people to hear this. So, because you and I have both been getting a lot of hate recently on social media. So you had 2 guys confirmed pro now, correct?
Yeah, two confirmed pro, and trying to see if there's another one in the mix here. We're trying to work out some things.
There we go. So can you kind of talk about, quickly, not quickly, but can you discuss, like, from those 2 guys that have confirmed professional, maybe talk about where they're going to, and then what did they have that stood out for them to actually get to that level from college, from the NAIA, not just, most people think you have to go NCAA to go pro, and that's obviously not the case, but what happened and how did that process work?
Yeah, so Josh went to Tormenta in USL League One, and Guy went to Richmond in USL League One, and I think their opening game is actually against each other.
Oh,
so
nice.
that'll be fun. Yeah, fun one to watch. I'm looking forward to going and watching those guys play. But yeah, I think that one of the key characteristics that they had that I think stand out for sure would really be the growth mindset. I think both were really big players. These weren't guys that were kind of like super under the radar and weren't very good, and then somehow got really good and got really lucky necessarily. These were guys that were very competent, a lot of accolades in their college careers, and definitely on people's radars and things like that. But their work ethic and their growth mindset was tremendous. I mean, I think sometimes players are so big nowadays that they can't be told things. It's difficult for them to take criticism. They maybe have some issues trying to see, like, hey, does this person really know what they're doing, et cetera, et cetera. And these 2 were the complete opposite. These 2 had complete and total confidence in our program and in our ability to make decisions that puts them in the best growth possible, and puts them in the best light to be seen and to develop and be ready for the moment to be seen. So I really think the growth mindset that they had and their ability to be coached and was probably one of the biggest things that I would say that would stand out. They obviously had a lot of other characteristics that you have to be able to be a top college.
The prerequisite.
Player. Yeah, I mean, you got the prereqs, so they had those things, but I think their ability to every day just want to grow and want to know more, and even hear the hard things as well, not just the good things, but the hard things. Yeah, I think that separates them from a lot of college players and a lot of players in general.
Can you highlight when you talk about growth mindset, because there might be somebody here listening to that and they don't necessarily connect with what that actually means at that level. So can you kind of expand on what you're referring to when you say the growth mindset at the college level to go to a pro level?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's similar, principally anyway. The details are different, but principally it's the same. You've got players that I'll give you an example. I'll try and use an analogy. So if we play a game, and I'll use myself. If we play a game and I'm playing and we win 3-0 and I scored a goal and had an assist, so we did totally fine. Like I got a couple stats, whatever, and you come up to me And, you know, in your post-game reflection, you come back to me after looking at maybe some film or something. You say, Safe, you know, this and this was really good. Here are 4 things or 4 moments, and you show me a series of 4 30-second clips where, you know, you're like, hey, these things need to improve. These things need to change. You might even, depending on how bad they are, these things, hey, this here is unacceptable. Your lack of transition in this moment is unacceptable, and it almost cost us a goal. I think the tendency for most players would be either to verbalize this or to at least think it. Well, I scored a goal and had an assist. Like, Kyle, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, like, who are you? You know, what, like, you're just a college coach, like at whatever, like who, like, or you're just a club coach, or you're just, you know, I think it's irrespective of level. Like, even pro players will look at some of the top coaches in the world and think that stuff, right? So, those two, however, would take that stuff on board and very seriously. So the types of conversations that we had were deep in that respect. They were very serious and sincere, and they were genuine about taking the feedback and then actually doing something to improve. So if I would tell them, like, here's what needs to happen, and usually I would, you know, the next time at training, I want to see you transitioning more than anybody out there, to put a period on or an exclamation point on this nonsense. And it would be like, okay, then, you know, the next training session, you know, Josh would be flying around the pitch, you know, just, I mean, he'd win every ball back that is possible to be won. And he in particular is a very attacking, capable player. So for him to do that, it's like, you know, that tells you something. But these are the things that I think you need to have to then maybe for coaches to have a deeper look and fine tune things that need to be better about your game. Like, if you're an attacking player, how much quality do you have in the final third to be successful at the college level? And then what does that quality need to look like to be at the pro level? I can't even have that conversation if I'm having a conversation with you about, hey, you don't take criticism well. You know, we can't even get there.
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but at your level, I mean, that probably happens a lot where you have to get that criticism because, you know, you can't be losing games if you want to win a national tournament or the conference or whatever you're getting, whatever derby game that you have coming up. You know, at your level, you have to be winning. So you need players to be doing their job and their role. Is that accurate?
I mean, without a doubt, without a doubt, we've got business to take care of, and we're very critical, but we also work really hard to give everybody what they need to be the best prepared as possible.
Right.
So, and listen, we're critical of ourselves too. I think our coaching staff is unbelievably critical of each other and of themselves, and we try and work really hard to put our players in the best position to succeed. So, yeah, if we're going to step up to that, if I'm gonna, and this is the way that we say, if I'm gonna give that type of effort, then absolutely I'm gonna expect that type of effort. I think that this is, I mean, it's common sense.
So on that note, I want to ask you this question as a coach and coaching staff. Do you guys, you know, in your environment, do you learn more from winning or from losing, and why?
I think we learn. I think the scars run deeper when you lose. There's an emotional response to that cuts deep. When you win, there could be cuts, or in other words, like opportunities to learn, but those cuts aren't as deep, I don't think, as they are when you lose. And I think part of that as well is kind of just the psychology of people. So I think that this is actually somewhat like built into our society, is to accept a little bit of mediocrity. So like, if you win, you kind of like, you take away the mediocrity of like, well, at least we won type thing. And at best, maybe you say, well, we won, but you know, we got some things to work on. You come across very few players that will, and that will take a win and be extremely disappointed with it. I have to say that these two, they were like that though. If we won but we didn't have a good performance, you know, they'd be pretty upset. And it's something that I actually have to work on myself, is trying not to be as upset about, you know, a win based on the performance. But I think that, yeah, like I said, the cuts are deeper when you lose, and you'll have very few individuals that can really respond from a win and take away the proper things from a win.
Okay. the reason why I asked that question is because I think you highlighted it a little bit, but especially in the youth environment, parents in particular, even coaches, when you win, you go, okay, we won the game. It's nothing else is relevant, right? But when we lose, then you go, especially from a coaching perspective, we go, oh man, we need to fix X, we need to fix Y, we need to fix Z to get the result better next week. And I just think that's so huge for you to bring that up in the college environment, because people need to understand that when you progress through these levels, you obviously you hit it already. You hit the prerequisite. Everybody has a certain skill level. It's now that next step, like the small details that separate Josh from the rest of the pack. Now, using Josh as the example, if I remember correctly, he represented the U.S. Virgin Islands, correct? Is that right? And can you kind of expand on his history with that? And then I have a couple points or questions I want to ask about that in particular.
He's played in Nations League for U.S. Virgin Islands several times. And in the last few times, actually, this past year, he ended up being named the captain of the team there. So yeah, and I think that that's part of his mindset is really the catalyst for that when you're considering like even winning and taking lessons from winning. Listen, you've got to be a proper winner to be able to win a game and walk away saying like we need to do better. And they both definitely possess that characteristic.
So how many caps does he have from the U.S. Virgin
I'd have to check how many caps he has, but I mean he's a regular 90-minute player. I mean he's a big time player for them for sure.
Think like that type of experience has helped him really excel at the college game and now beyond, and why?
Yeah, I mean I think the ability to see to see a different environment gives you perspective. So I just think that perspective is so important. So, were there lessons, that he learned with the U.S. Virgin Islands national team that were very important and meaningful? I'm sure without a doubt. Now, I wasn't there, so I don't know what all of those are, but I'm sure without a doubt. That said, regardless of where he would have been, I think just the ability to have perspective is so important, because it starts to open your eyes and you start to be able to discern right from wrong, quality from not quality, where you really stack up with things, because he will have obviously played with some very good long-standing professionals that are older than him with the U.S. Virgin Islands national team. So, yeah, I think that perspective is definitely useful.
That's interesting. So, because I remember when I went up and visited your environment, you could tell, like, especially, he's probably naturally like this, but naturally athletic. He seemed very determined to win. So my thought is, and I could be wrong, but my thought was like being in that environment and seeing what the next, because that's almost like a next level. Obviously, he's representing a small country, but you're representing your country. So I feel like that might only help propel players to want and thrive to do more in especially high pressure stake scenarios. Now, my question to go with that is, when you have American kids that come into the environment, so from youth soccer to that, how do you feel like they compete against somebody like Josh? Are they close? Are they not close? Is it, can you kind of expand on that point? Because I think people need to, at least be aware of what it looks like when you get to see somebody like Josh compared to somebody that's coming from like their age group from youth soccer into the college level.
It's very difficult to come out of the youth college level or the youth soccer level and compete with Josh and Guy. I mean, it's very, very difficult. Very difficult. They're different. They're different. They're very good. But listen, they've put time into
right.
it, But I think that, I think for the people that are watching, from kind of your camp, looking at youth soccer and like, how can I be prepared? I mean, whatever level you think, like whatever level of preparedness you think you need, like you've got to raise that.
3 or 5 exit.
Yeah. You just have to. There are some things in life that we just cannot conceive, like the reality, fathom of the reality of what those things are going to be like. Right. A really simple example that I think a lot of parents will understand, and maybe they can help their kids understand in different ways as well, would just be having children. Like, you can talk about it and you can read books about it and you can sit here and tell me like the best way to raise kids, et cetera, and you can give me some great advice, by the way, so it's not like it's nonsense, but then there's the kid, and then you've got to keep this thing alive, and it's like, whoa, like this is going to be a challenge. Right. Like there's a lot to learn, so I think that we have to help young people, and I think it starts at home. I really do. I think I think a lot of this stuff starts at home. We have to help young people understand that whatever their expectation is, like they need to raise it, and also why they need to raise it. You can tell your son or your daughter, listen, you've not been in that environment, so it's how can you even understand what it's like? So what you can do is try and raise your expectation. Like whatever you think training hard is, try and train harder and try and push that week over week. And then obviously give them some of that perspective we talked about just a minute ago. You brought up some, which was fantastic, and we'll have to do that again. I think it was fantastic for your guys to be able to be in a college environment for a few days, being younger, and see what that's like, and just understand, like, man, this is going to be, it's not easy. Anybody that would have come in there, it's like they might come in thinking, one thing and then leaving another thing, and the likelihood of that happening is like 99%.
I can definitely tell you they walked out of there going, what the fudge? They did not realize. And I kept trying to tell them, like, look, when we were actually driving up because our flight got canceled, I'm like, look, you guys think, and in fact, two of them said, hey, we're going to crush this. And I'm like, okay, you're going to see when you walk in there what it's really going to look like. They're like, no, we got this. Okay. You're going to find out what's coming. And I'm like, they're in off season. They're not even in full season. They're not even in the actual season. So it's just, but again, I think it adds to the point that you just made. Like, I think the expectation, and I'm probably using the word ego and the expectation that kids have these days, that they could walk into an environment, whatever it is, and they're going to go crush it, which again, I love the confidence, but it's not realistic to expect that you're going to walk in getting that. And then I'll add, or I guess I'll ask you this. If a player, I think I want to be careful I ask this question. Because you have as a college coach, you have the ability to give athletic scholarships, not even talking about academic at this point. Mm-hmm. So if a player is not on an athletic scholarship, even a percentage at all, that probably means that they're not, I could be wrong, but they probably don't have as much potential value to a college coach. I'm not even talking about you, I'm just talking in general. Whereas somebody that's earning 20% of their tuition or 30%, they probably have potentially higher value. So like kids coming in, and I just want people to kind of hear this point, and then you can expand on it if you'd like to. College coaches can only give so many scholarships. So how do you know how many I'm sure you do, but do you know how many you can actually give from a college perspective? Well, from your school?
I mean, I can tell you what the NAIA rule is, and I can tell you that we're nowhere near it. The NAIA rule allows you 12 full scholarships for soccer, and we're far below that, and far below almost all of our competitors. Certainly in the top 25 without a doubt. Right. So yeah, I mean, I think obviously like the ability for a young person to bring some level of financial backing, whether it's academic scholarships or whether it's their FAFSA, or I've seen all kinds of stuff, man, and I've been really impressed, and I think it says a lot. I'll give you some
examples.
Yeah, I'll give you some examples. I've had a player who actually ended up captaining my team for 3 years from South Florida. That Noah, you remember Noah?
Yeah. He plays defensive mid, number 6.
Yeah, Noah had he had like $5,000 or $4,000 from his community, like from community scholarships that he earned via his academics and his character that he was bringing to the table every year. I mean, so the money helps, right? And then the fact that he was able to get that was like the fact that he could garner that type of community support that tells you something. You're like, okay, well, this must be a good guy. Right. So yeah, and then he ends up captaining the team, for 3 seasons, his last 3 seasons. So yeah, I think that again, trying to broaden for your audience, try and broaden your perspective as much as you can, which is part of why we do this right here.
It's a fair point. It's trying to educate people. So with that being said, in terms of the character traits, and I want to add this point because I think a lot of people, especially in youth soccer, they get confused that like as an attacker, so a 7, 9, 11, maybe a 10, that they only have to play offense, or they only have to attack. And I see this all the time at youth level. It drives me through a freaking wall. Like we've had kids complain saying, well, I play number 7. I shouldn't have to come back. Do players in your environment, do they have to come back and play defense? Or what happens if they refuse to not do that? for you?
Everybody attacks, everybody defends.
Mm.
Everybody attacks, everybody defends. I mean, this is a non-negotiable. I think that you could find some tactics in some environments, and I mean certainly some tactical situations, some game moments where that might not be the case. You might ask a player to go forward and stay forward, and sometimes I mean we play a team that leaves both of their forwards up. They don't defend at all, both of their forwards. So and they do it in a clever way where they kind of use them in a clever way to try and hit you on the counter, you know. But obviously they're giving up something on the other end, so they have to be really solid there. And but I think the idea of like when we're talking about the youth game, the youth game is a developmental game, right? So if we're looking at the youth game and I'm looking at like a developmental period, the idea that somebody wouldn't defend or attack, you know, if you've got a center back that all they do is put their foot through the ball, like what kind of developing are they doing? Like now we're no longer in a developmental period, right? So to me, it just doesn't make sense. Like if you're a youth soccer player, you should want to develop every aspect of yourself that you can.
So I want to ask you this question, and then there's two comments or questions I want to get to. Would you take a player on your team as a recruit that refuses to play defense?
That refuses to play defense? No.
Okay, thank you. So we have two questions that have come in or maybe more. I'm just looking at two right now. So one is from Peter. He's actually an agent in Europe. I've connected with a couple of times, and he wrote, "Transition defense is part of the new modern football in Europe." That's a great point, Peter. So I'm sure, Steve, you can add value to that. But if you want to play at a high level, college or above, if you don't want to play defense or transition defense, as he put it, good luck playing at the high level in football in general. Is that something you would agree with?
I mean, for me, it's without a doubt. Again, I think that there are some extreme cases.
So an exception to the rule.
Yeah, I mean, your exception to the rule is like a Messi.
Wait, so hold on. Before you continue, there's a comment from somebody that said, "Are we talking youth? ? I mean, not everyone has to defend, etc. If so, they get tired quick. Messi never defends." That was literally the comment.
So yeah, Messi. I mean, for me, you know, I respect the opinion. I just don't, and I see the Messi part the same. Obviously, Messi doesn't defend, but you know, Messi is Messi, and there are very few of those. So, you know, I think the majority of people in the world would argue there's one, and they're probably right. So, you know, Ronaldo doesn't really defend. Again, you get some exceptions. I think, you know, Vinny Jr. sometimes doesn't always defend. But again, like we're talking about some of the most elite soccer players to ever play the game,
right?
And not just to play the game today, right? So like let me be clear about that. To ever play the game. To ever play the game.
Yeah, I agree.
History of the game.
Yeah.
So
it's not fair to compare a kid to Messi.
I don't see that application to anybody at all, if that's the case. So if you are Messi or Neymar or Vinny or Ronaldo, then fair enough.
So be it.
Yeah.
You're the exception to the rule.
We're talking about four people out of 6 billion people on the planet. Like it's just, you know, it's
no, I'm glad you said it that way because it actually tied in perfectly. Because it's like I think people kind of miss the boat, and I don't know if it's in youth that they feel like their child's actually better than they are, and it might be that they think their kid might be the next Messi, and you know, Messi. I'll put it this way: Messi and Ronaldo and Neymar and Mbappe and all those guys, they are the exception to the rule because they are that good at what they do. They can kind of get away with, you know, I don't want to say murder, but they can kind of get away with a bunch of stuff. That's why they're able to do what they do. And coaches, you know, have to check and adapt that. But from a youth player perspective, from my perspective, it's about doing all sides of the game. You put it already. It's developmental. It's learning because they need to be prepared for your environment or better if they're going to go pro. And if they're not being prepared because they're refusing to go play defense, for example, they're missing one of the 4 key elements of the game. How do they expect to ever get to that next step if they're refusing to do one part of it? So I just find that very interesting.
Yeah, I think for the youth game, it's not even like I don't even that's not even a thing. I think if you're a youth player, if you're watching this and you're a youth player, or you're a parent that has a youth player, like you're in a developmental period, and you need to develop. Like it's vital. Like you've got
Yeah.
a limited window to develop. This is not about people like telling you what to do and like you're gonna push back because you don't like authority or whatever. Like your coach doesn't know what they're doing or what. Like this is all nonsense. At the end of the day, like you need to develop and you have a small window to develop. You need to take advantage of that development as much as you
Right.
can because you get to a point, and it happens in the youth game as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? You'll get to a point even in the youth game where your evaluation as a player is a lot more strict. It's a lot more stringent. Like people are looking for very specific things at a very specific level
Right.
of efficacy. And if you don't have that because you didn't develop it, you're gonna miss opportunities. Like it's gonna hurt you in the end. Take the opportunity to develop.
Okay, so the same guy asked another point, filet mignon. So I'll answer this and I'll add value, and then I'll make a point to this. So he said, so are we talking everyone should play like Atletico Madrid playing style? Pep Guardiola has a system where you defend to get the ball back quickly when lost, but not everyone drops down. So Philo, I don't even know how to say your name. I apologize. How do I explain this to you? There's many different ways that a team can play defense. So Atletico Madrid typically plays in a low block and a 4-4-2 defensive style where they defend very deep. That's pretty much typical what they do. They don't really want the ball. They're a transition team. Now, Pep Guardiola is a team that wants to dominate possession, so they have a higher percentage opportunity to counter press and win the ball back in higher phases of play. Now, there'll be many times, and say if you can add value to this, please feel free to. Because again, I think this is important for people that are in the youth game to understand that there are different types of ways to play defense based on how a team wants to play. And using Pep's system that you brought up, they're able to dominate the ball more. They try to have 60, 70% possession, which means they're able to pin a team back in a defensive shape, like a low block, and then they can try and counter press quickly. Now, there's also periods that I've watched Man City play, and they're defending in a mid block 4-4-2. That's just part of the phase of play that they're in. So there's different phases of play to the game based on the opponent. So if you watch the Club World Cup, which was literally Man City versus Fluminense, there was periods where Man City was defending in a low block in their defensive third because Fluminense was able to break the high press. The Man City then recovered, they broke the mid block, and then got to the final phase of play, and they were in the low block defending. So it happens all the time. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Safe, just from what you guys do at the college. We don't have to give your tactics, but if you want to add value to the whole like different phases of defending phases that or play, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk tactics all day. I love tactics. Probably my favorite part actually of
Mm-hmm.
coaching soccer. Aside from having the connection with the players, but yeah, I mean, like you said, there's different ways to control the game. You can control the game with the ball, and you can control the game without the ball. And there's different ways to control the game without the ball. So you can either filter your team into or filter the opposition into certain spaces, and then win it there. Or you can sit back and allow them to force them to make their own mistakes and their own bad choices. I mean, there's a variety of ways to do it and shapes to do it in as well. And yeah, they're all very. It's all very interesting to watch how people do what they do. But I think your assessment is accurate.
That's fair. Hold on, I got to take care of that real quick. Boom, took that one out. Okay, so I have more questions and things I want to talk about, but I do want to get to some people that are asking stuff. I was baffled to see my daughter's teammates staying in position instead of getting back on defense. Yeah, I agree. That's pretty funny as well. They should definitely get back on defense. Welcome to Houston. Safe, you got no idea, bro, what happens on a day-to-day, man. I would love to bring you out one
You're
day.
right.
I want to bring you to a tournament once when you have some free time, so you can kind of see the kind of shit that we deal with on a day-to-day. Like I brought my buddy, who's the technical director in France. I'll have to introduce you to him. You guys will get along very well. And he's the director at Olympique Lyonnais, and I brought him to a tournament because he would always come and do like training sessions. He's like, "Hey, the level's pretty good. I like it." I brought him to a tournament called the Sarasota Cup, which is a decent tournament in Florida, and he was like, I was like, "You're gonna be kind of surprised, Joel, what you're gonna see." He's like, "No, no, no, there's no way." And he's like, "What the fuck am I watching?" And I said, I told you that it's not pretty. So it's interesting. So when you get a chance, we'll connect on that. But Yusuf said, yes, how do you feel about a young kid playing multiple positions? Oh, sorry, multiple sports. And when would you specialize if your goal is to play at the highest level?
Yeah, again, I remember answering this one last time. I did in my master's degree. This was my final research paper, was about the multi-sport specialization versus a single sport specialization. and youth players as it translated to how successful they were in college or the professional level. And again, I think that the evidence, I go based on the evidence as often as I can. The evidence is, I mean, it's really a toss up. You know, you have people that have played one sport pretty much all their life at an elite level and made it. And then you have some people that have played multiple sports for a large part and made it. I think to try and answer the question the best that I can is, I think the transition that I usually see and all of that data was around that 14, 15 year old age. Like there was a transition to a single sport specialization, usually, not in every case, but usually. So I would say that I actually think it's good if your kids play multiple sports growing up. Some of the data that was the most clear would be on players with knee injuries that had single sport specialization in like basketball or soccer or volleyball. So things that would be very intensive for the knees. And nowadays, as you know, like we're playing all the time. Like they've got a summer season, and summer workouts and et cetera. But now they got the spring season. They've got like a mini winter camp, and then they've got a fall season. And like people are playing year round, and they're just like their knees aren't developed yet. So yeah, I think at the very least, playing multiple sports, especially if you can vary what the sports are and the use of different parts of your body for them, I think that makes a big difference. Swimming is a very low impact, sport that someone can do. Golf is a different type of sport. But I think if you're going to like rotate between basketball and volleyball and soccer, like you're putting a lot of very difficult, you're putting some difficult miles on you. So that's my best crack at the question in 60 seconds.
Well, and I can add a little bit of value to this, like just from a personal experience. Like I have, especially my left knee is horrendous. That's partly genetic, but that's also probably because, to Safe's point, I put a lot of miles in the tank. It was mostly soccer and futsal, but it was just, I mean, I remember when I was in high school, I did high school practice, and then I would go do 3 hours later, I would go train for my club team. And that, and I was going to ask this question anyways, but that, to me, that's just, you're loading way too much too soon. And my diet and my nutrition at the time was horrendous compared to what it needed to be able to even perform at that level consistently, or I shouldn't say perform, but to be able to maximize my level of performance doing both of those things without a lot of time. Now, Safe, I want to ask you this, because I think this is something that happens in youth a lot as well, is overtraining. How many sessions do you guys do a day, in not just preseason, but in the regular season?
Well, in preseason, it's twice a day, and in the regular season, it's one session a day. And we have a day off each week as well.
Okay.
We have film as well.
Okay. But like an actual training session, not during preseason, because preseason you said was 2, but I think I missed the part. But you said during the season it's 1?
Right.
Okay. So
like 1. on-field session?
On-field
session is 1,
okay.
Yeah.
So 1 session a day. Now, you said preseason is 2. So when you guys were doing preseason, what, like you would do a session at like 8 a.m. and then like 4? Is that what it looked like?
Yeah, preseason's usually something like early morning on the field session, something technical that relates to the tactical topic that we want to do later in the afternoon. So, for example, if maybe we're working on how we would advance the ball through the middle third in possession, in the morning we might have a series of technical activities that get them receiving the ball on the half turn, weight forward, taking a positive first touch and driving, something like that.
Right.
Finding pockets, et cetera, firing the balls in on the floor, et cetera, et cetera. So we might do that for an hour, and maybe an hour. It's usually an hour. Then in the early afternoon, around maybe 12, we would have a classroom session that would talk about the tactics, and then on the whiteboard and go over some film. And then we would go out to the pitch in the later afternoon and actually execute the tactical part of the session.
And so what I want people to take away from that piece right there is really important. I'm guessing that's at least probably 6 hours between the first session to the second session. Is that a fair statement?
Is it 6 hours in between?
Yeah, give or take.
Yeah, it's usually, I think it's like 7 a.m. And then 2:30 p.m.
Okay. So 5 to 6 hours, right? And so the reason why I want to bring this up is because that gives the players time to eat, to rest, and possibly eat again. So they were getting nutrition, hydrating, and recovering in time, that space. Like what happens a lot of time with youth kids or youth players, what happens is they'll do a private session at say 4 o'clock, and then they're driving to their team practice at 6. So they're not eating well. They're usually getting some sort of fast food element. It's junk. And then they're going to do another training session. And that over time will essentially capitulate the player's body from high level performance. So
Well,
I just wanted to at least highlight for
that doesn't
parents.
get included in that. You're right. And another thing that doesn't get talked about very rarely is the burnout.
There you go.
Like you are going to burn. You're going to overtrain them for sure. To your point, and you're going to burn them out. I mean, mentally, there is only so much that you can handle.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, maybe again, someone might say, well, we've been doing this for an entire year, or we've been doing this for 2 years, or whatever, and it's worked out great. And I mean, of course, there are always exceptions, but burnout is there's 5 stages of it, and by the time you get to burnout, you're talking about like
you've burned them.
Yeah, and it's years and years. And there are some cases where people can't overtraining as well. It's very serious. Some people cannot. Their careers ended because of overtraining. Right. I mean,
yeah, my recommendation is always a minimum of 4 hours between sessions, because you need to be able to at least get a good meal and some sort of rest in between that. If you're not getting that, it's in the long term, like you're highlighting, the player will have some. In 99.9% of cases, it will be a detrimental impact to that person, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And I think that this is honestly, I feel bad. Like, I feel bad for a lot of youth parents as well, because there will be obviously, there will be a lot of them that will want to do the right thing, even if they're maybe doing some things that aren't best practice. Right. They just may not know. And they're taking bits of information and trying to put it together the best that they can. And that's part of why, I think that what you're doing and what we're trying to do is so important, because for those parents that are trying to do the best, give their kid the best that they can, like, there's a lot of information, burnout, overtraining, training periodization, and microcycles and mesocycles. Like you got a job. Like, what are you supposed to do? Sit around and research this stuff all day? It's not that simple. You got responsibilities. So it's important to have somebody in your corner that has an idea.
Okay, so let's get to some more comments and questions that have popped up.
Sure.
So this guy said, I played at a decent level in the U.S. and England. The one thing I struggle to do in the U.S. is to develop a specific player type. It seems like every player is a jack of all trades, but a master of none. How do you do that in a session as a coach? So I'm guessing this guy's a coach. I don't know if you want to try and answer that. I can.
Well, for me, it's probably more of, I think it's more related to youth, right? Because that's where you really need to ground, like, whatever skill that is. But I think IDPs, for me, individual development plans, like, are really important, because I will see some things that I may want to, maybe that they have like it might not even be a skill that maybe the kid is like really good at already, but maybe it's a skill that the kid really likes to do.
Right.
I mean, I've seen some funny things. I've seen some kids that maybe like they're really, really good in the air, like exceptionally good in the air defensively. They win everything defensively, but they're not very good in the other box. So, like, there's a great opportunity to develop a particular skill through an IDP, or if there already is a skill that is good that you want to expand. Like, Guy's a great example of someone who won headers. Like, Guy wins every defensive header.
He was a center back. I remember correctly.
He was a center back, left side center back. And Guy did not always win every header, but that was something that we saw that he could develop, and we made that a particular focus in his IDP. And I think that's one of the things that I'm sure Richmond is excited about, is someone who's hard as nails in the back, but also can play on the floor. But these are like the marquee things about him. There are other things that he has to his game, but these are those marquee things. So I think when you identify those things, having an IDP and making sure that whatever it is that you're targeting, the IDP is measurable, like having SMART goals, ones that are measurable and you can actually attain. I think that's really important. Like, you can't just, I think a lot of players end up being a jack of all trades because they kind of just, it's like the shotgun approach. It's like showing up to Disney you know, and just saying, well, if I stumble across a player today, then good for me and my program. Like that's you
That's
got to
not how
be.
it works.
Yeah, well, you got to be more. I think. Well, I think that's what a lot of coaches are thinking. You know, and you got to be more intentional than that. And I think that players have to be more intentional
Right.
as well, and coaches have to try and be as intentional as possible as well about doing some of these things. But that's probably the way that I would.
Well, and I use the word or phrase, you need to be efficient and effective with your time.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not doing that, you're wasting your time. So, Patrick Mahomes, I don't know football very well, but I think he's a football player. Played different sports. He played soccer. If your kid is really dedicated and loves what they do, it's good for them. My kid does volleyball and basketball, flag football, and soccer. Hey, if it works for you, it works for you. They do it all because they want to. Yes. Okay. Then artificial turf is the body's worst enemy. I wish they would practice and play more on natural grass.
Yeah, to get real high quality turf is very expensive.
Yep.
You know, but you know, grass and turf, those are.
Yeah, I mean, I can add my brother as a coach blew out his knee, ripped his patella tendon from turf. So his cleat.
Most of the turf that's out there is just not.
Yeah, not a fit. It's not.
People aren't going to pay
top
the type
dollar.
of money.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. Not
Yeah,
usually.
he literally, his cleat, his stud got stuck in the turf and boom, popped off the patella tendon. So, and he was coaching, not even in playing. So for sure, I get that point. Okay, so moving on, could you give a percentage likelihood that somebody would get a full athletic scholarship? Not, it doesn't even have to be from your school, but just like a general rule of thumb in the soccer world. What do you think the percentage is a player gets a full ride? Because a lot of parents that I talk to say my goal for my child is a full ride, and I'm like, you might want to, you know, it's cool for them to go to college, but if you're expecting I didn't even talk about academic, athletic full ride. That's what they said. I'm like, you know, your kid's gonna have to be almost a generational talent to pull that off.
Yeah, I mean, let's try and put this in a perspective then. So, if the max in NCAA is 9.6 scholarships, that's less than what it takes to field an 11. So statistically speaking, the odds that you would get a full ride is just athletically. You know, I mean, I'm not going to say it never happened, obviously, but yeah, I mean, you should not. That's not what your goal should be. And even if your goal is like, well, I want to get a full ride and I'm going to use, academics, I'm willing to use academics and athletics. Personally, I think your goal should be, I'm going to develop myself the best that I can and put myself in the best position that I can to succeed. That's very, very vague, but it's meant to be vague because I want to succeed in everything. I want to put myself in the best academic position to succeed. I want to put myself in the best athletic position to succeed, and I want to put myself in the best character position to succeed. And everything's going to come for you if you do that.
Right.
It's just going to happen.
It'll pay off.
You know, people think that's like, sometimes people think that's too much wishful thinking. But I'm not a wishful thinking kind of guy. Let me try and help people understand exactly what's so special about that. How many people do you know with the mindset in their life? Forget youth soccer players. Youth soccer players, like, 0.0001%. Just in general, how many people in your life do you know that are so dedicated to their craft that they're just constantly looking to improve themselves, not even worried about their competition? They're like, I just want to be the best person that I can be in everything that I do, and they're serious about it, and they get after it every day as hard as they can. How many people do you know like that? Now, take that 1% that you know of the people that are like that, and now apply that to youth soccer players. Like, make that the goal.
Here's a great question for you. Just came in. Would you take work ethic and character over a pure skill player?
If the pure skill player lacks, I'm assuming the question is, the pure skill player lacks the work ethic and character. Then, I mean, yeah, it's a no-brainer. I'm not taking the pure skill player. That doesn't mean anything to me.
But can you explain maybe why that would be the case, at least in your environment? Why would you choose somebody that has the work ethic and character over a pure skill player that doesn't have it? Why for your environment that's important?
Well, I mean, what are skills? They're attributes that people develop over time, right? So then, you know, if you have a work ethic and you have character, then you can improve your skills over time. Now, if you have skills and you don't have a character and work ethic, then whatever your skills are, whatever you're bringing in preseason is where the ceiling is. You're not going to get any better. And if you're not going to get any better, then now we're back to the conversation about like how good do you have to be to walk into the environment and immediately impact it. Okay, like you've got to be Kylian Mbappe, who, by the way, I'm sure had to work very hard growing up. You know, like,
popular belief.
Yeah, it's inescapable. It's inescapable. It's just inescapable. You got to do the job.
That's interesting. Now, I have some questions that are like top five's not the right word, but like 5. So the question is, what are 5 ways that a player could get your attention or your staff's attention in the recruiting process? Like to really grab your attention from everybody else, because you're getting, or at least you and your staff are getting 40 to 50 emails a day on average. So what, maybe it doesn't have to be 5, but I just picked 5 ways that somebody could quickly grab your attention. It could be like how they write the email. It could be whatever it is. If, you know, just some quick things that you could have.
Yeah, I think their professionalism and the way that they, you know, the way that they communicate. I think communication is unbelievably important. So if the very first time that you're ever like articulating your thoughts to somebody is me on a Zoom call, like that's not good. Like you should definitely develop those skills, yeah, before you get on a Zoom call. So I obviously I think that's one. I think your upbringing, so like the way that you interact with your parents, I think is really important. I think is often overlooked. Like the way that players interact with their parents, I'm interested in that. Like I'm watching how players interact with their parents. And one of the best times to see that is when, like right after a game. If you're watching a youth game, so I'm trying to give some advice to the youth crowd. If you're watching a youth game and, you know, your son or your daughter walks over after the game and, you know, like they look like they just can't be talked to, you know, like they're like, don't want to hear it from you and whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I'm not interested in, you know, they might say, well, I have a good reason. My parent was shouting me down the whole match. Okay, well, everybody's got a good reason to, you know, to be aggravated in this world. Everybody does. You know, that doesn't give you license to do it. So I think the way that you deal with your parents, I think the way that you communicate, and then obviously the type of effort that you're putting in on the pitch is paramount. So like we go back to the character and the work rate of the player. We go back to the defensive transition. We go back to the offensive transition. You know, I want to know that players want to play and they're willing to do the work to play, and that needs to be present when I'm watching them play.
How important is it in your perspective, like when you're watching, like let's say you physically go and watch a potential recruit, how important is it from your perspective, you know, how they handle warm up? How do they interact with their coach before the game? Do they, just little pieces like that, like the little small details that aren't even on the field yet? How important are those details for you?
Everything. I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at everything. I mean, the way that I've told recruits this before, and I've told their parents, you know, sitting in the office is something like, you know, I need to know that like I can get along with you and that we have similar values, because I'm going to be on a bus ride, you know, with you for 7 hours to, you know, somewhere in Mississippi, and like I don't want that to be a miserable bus ride for me. I don't want that to be a miserable bus ride for you
or anybody else.
So, yeah. So, I mean, I want, like, you want there to be, as the kids would say today, you want the vibe to be good. Like, yeah, I want good vibes too. I don't want to be miserable all the time. So yeah, if you don't warm up properly, or you could care less when you're warming up, like what else do you care less about?
Right.
You care less about how you carry yourself when we stop to eat at Chipotle or wherever it is that we're having lunch on the way. Okay, man, like that's a problem. Like that's a for me, that's a problem. Some people won't care about that, but for me, that's definitely a problem.
Well, and the reason why I bring that up is because this is something that I see as a trend in the youth game, is that a lot of the kids that are coming through youth and they, whatever level they play at ECNL, MLS Next, whatever, they're doing a warm up that is like either they're not serious enough, or the duration of a warm up. Like I'm not even talking like the technical piece or the pregame stuff. I'm talking about just physically warming up is just, you know, it's a joke. I'm trying to be as polite as I can about it, but like they'll jog 5 times up and back to a cone and back. They'll do a couple high knees, couple butt kicks. Like Can you kind of elaborate on what, you don't have to go into crazy detail, but what does your team's physical warm-up look like before a match?
Well, I think activation with bands is really important. I really think that's important. So we usually let them out and give them about 3 to 5 minutes to jog around, knock the balls around, especially for away. But even if we're at home, to just get on the pitch and knock the balls around and kind of just get in the mindset a little bit more from going sitting in the locker room where you're kind of like you're just in the locker room and things are cagey and you're ready to go. So we let them go out there do that for about 5 minutes. We'll bring them in after that to do their activation work. Before they do their activation work, they usually have a brief little chat, like a 20-second, bang, 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 focus, this, that,
like a hoorah speech.
Blah. Like one of those things. And then they do their activation work with their bands, which again, I think is really important. And then they do their dynamic warm up where they've got several different dynamic movements that they go through. And then we'll take the starters down to the corner. We'll have the subs out into the middle of the field, and the bench personnel will have their technical warm up there. Well, they have a series of technical activities and a series of stretches in between and water. And then same thing with the 11 technical warm up that turns into some tactical application in a small area as well, with a series of stretches and that as well, dynamic stretches as well, and some static, and then water. And then final preparations, and then we go. So yeah, I mean, you're physically and mentally preparing them for 45 minutes, almost. It's. I think our warm up probably takes 40 or 45 minutes by the time they start it to the end of it.
And so it's a lot of stuff. You said they get. I'm just trying to recap this, but you said 3 to 5 minutes kind of on their own. Then they come back in, not to the locker room, but to the main area, give or take, and then they have their own little hoorah speech, and they start you said pre-activations, this would be the band work, correct? Mm-hmm. And then they do a physical warm-up, and then you separate them.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure I got that correct. So, I mean, I'm going to take a guess. You can, tell me if I'm incorrect or close to it. That's probably 15 to 20 minutes before they've even really got into ball work.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, it's about 15 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, and the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because, like I said, kids, and they're just doing 2 to 3 minutes of stuff, and then they're jumping in to get a ball. And I'm like, guys, if you're getting ready for a game, you actually have to we don't for example, our players, we don't always bring bands. We try to sometimes bring bands. We don't always remember to because it's a lot more hectic for us. But I'm a big believer in that stuff too. It's just they do not either know or they don't care to do the warm up that they need to do to get ready for the actual match. It's kind of insane. And it's not just our environment. It's a lot of environments, whether it's whatever league or team, it's crazy. And then they go to your environment if they get lucky enough to go there, and it's a huge wake up call for them because they're going, wow, I actually have to take care of myself and prepare. So I just wish from a youth perspective, we as youth coaches and people did a better job of actually preparing players for the reality of what the game is going to bring. It's a huge pet peeve of mine, unfortunately.
Listen, we talked about this last time, the gap in preparedness. So when they come to my environment and they've not been warming up properly for 3 years or whatever, that's just another skill that they have to learn.
Yep.
That is a barrier. That is a barrier before they can impact something. So again, this is, I think for youth players, this is so important, and parents, you need to try the best that you can to help them understand this. The least amount of barriers that they can have coming into the environment, the better. Especially ones that you're able to tackle in the youth environment. Having a proper warm-up, a proper focus in your warm-up is a barrier that you can cross when you're 14, when you're 12, whatever, anytime. Doesn't matter to me. By the time you're 18 and you come into my environment, that is not something that you want to be contending with. You will have a whole host of barriers that you will not have expected when you arrive that you will have to deal with. So the ones that are in your control now, tackle them now. Tackle as many of them you can now.
Okay, so flip that now. Let's look at cool down. Mm-hmm. What does a typical cool down look like? Because this is literally non-existent in youth soccer.
Yeah, we're more interested in the recovery day. We do have a cool down, they'll walk over, they'll thank the fans, and they'll do a little bit of walking around and stuff like that. But our big thing is the recovery day, not as much the the cool down.
So
I think the
expand on
reason
that
why
if you don't mind.
say again.
Can you expand on the recovery day, what that looks like?
Yeah, well, I'll say this about the cool down. We do have a cool down after training, and the reason why we have a cool down after training is less scientific as it relates to like injuries, and it's more the social aspect. Like that, like for a team that wants a culture, like that's a good time. That's a good time. You have a captive audience, right? That just worked hard, and everything else. They just went to battle together, and now you've got a chance for them to, like, for me to just walk away for 2 minutes, leave them completely alone, and let them sit there and talk. Some of the funniest, some of the loudest laughs that you get is in those moments. So I think it's a great time to build some team culture and team cohesion. And then the recovery day, really important. Doing some very light exercise, usually some light jogging, some soccer, tennis. Would do band work again. I would do some static stretching, some foam rolling. That's usually like what the process looks like.
Sweet. Okay. Now, we had a question come in, so I want to see if we can answer that. When playing opponents, how much do you review the other team, and what does that look like? That's a really good question.
Yeah. Well, for me, a lot, like all the time. I know. I mean, I can tell you just about almost anything about any team in the top 25 and the top 40 in the country. I want to know who I'm playing, and that helps me prepare. And we take the hours of film that I look at, and we break that down into like a 45-minute to an hour film session with the teams, and give them the strategy of how we're going to play in that game, how we're going to defend, how we're going to attack, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, film. Not everybody. I actually think very few people do that, by the way. But for me, that is a big part of my preparation as a coach and for our teams.
Well, I think you talked about it a second ago with the preparedness. If you know what the opponent's going to do, you are prepared to counteract them and take advantage of their weakness, for example.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'd be shocked if you talked to any of our players and they were like, "Yeah, I was surprised they did that." The other team, like everybody knows how the game's going to go. So it's really interesting watching. Sometimes practice is like it is a complete replication of the game, like what we do in training, and then like we're sitting there watching for the first 15 minutes, and you can even hear the guys on the bench, and they're just like, "Man, this is exactly how training went. This is exactly how we prepared it to be." And it's like, yeah, you hear people talk about that. I think Conor McGregor was one of those that said that he had that knockout, that really quick knockout, and he said that he knocked that guy out like thousands of times. Like he was using imagery, so he wasn't actually knocking out people, 1,000 days before the fight, but he was using imagery to prepare himself for that fight. And I think that, again, preparedness, like you said.
Okay. Now I want to change topics slightly. I think it still highlights the whole preparedness piece, but one of the things that I really admired about what you do is, like, when you came, this was 2019, I think it was 2019, maybe it's 2018, you came and you did that session for those 30 kids or whatever number it was, and you had them start scrimmaging, and it was a complete and utter shit show. They were doing, it was just over dribbling, running into people and whatnot. And the one thing that you said to Mitchell and I was, hey, you got to give them 5 minutes to figure it out. And again, I think that is something that is hugely undervalued in the youth game. And I can give you a perfect example of this. I was running a camp this morning. We gave the kids, it was from 9 to 11, we gave the kids the final 30 minutes to just play without a single parent or adult interaction. Just go figure it out. And there was a point where, like, 2 or 3 kids, they weren't fighting, but they're pushing each other, shoving and whatnot. And then you could hear the parents on the side, like, getting riled up. They're like, hey. And I'm like, just let them figure it out. It's okay. They will be okay. Nobody's going to die today. Like, let them kind of piece through it. And, let them get that edge and let them, figure it out. If we all start jumping on them, they're going to immediately react and not get that fire in their belly to be like, hey, I don't accept this, or whatever it is. So can you kind of highlight, like, that process for yourself in terms of, like, that example that I gave with the 5 minute, like, let them figure it out? How important is that for you at the college level of having players that can problem solve and figure out issues that arise?
We try our best. We really do. Like, it's something that the staff, like, we're very focused on. That first 10 minutes of the game, that first 15 minutes of the game, like, as much observation as possible. just observe. Observe, observe, observe. Let them figure some things out. Let us, continue to see like, hey, is the way that we prepared what we're seeing today from the opponent. Yeah, I think that's a very important period. And yeah, I think that in terms of in terms of wanting players that can figure things out and think, I've said this to our teams. Like, I didn't play with all the success that our teams had this year. I didn't play a single minute. Shocker. So then, who has to also, I have to be able to think critically and solve problems, but who also has to be able to do that? The people that are playing. So, as much as, I could say this for the parents, you're similar to me. Like, do you have to be able to think critically? Yes, but you're not going to play a minute. I'm not playing a minute. You're not playing a minute. So my critical thinking needs to be done in the preparation and delivering that in the preparation for the player, not as much during the game. Do I get an opportunity to give some feedback during the game? Sure. You get to do that. You get to do that at halftime and obviously post game. But that's meant for the coach as well. So like, everybody has their role and everybody has to understand their role. For the parent, your role your time to give feedback at its best is not during the game. That's not going to be when you're going to be most effective. So again, I'm not saying this. Wait,
are you serious?
Yeah, I know. I don't mean to burst any bubbles.
Mind blowing. There's no way.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not saying this to make anybody mad. I'm asking people to just think about this a little bit. Like, when are you going to be most effective at communicating with the player? This is the same thing for me as a coach. If I am going to give some information, it's got to be concise and it's got to be in words and language that makes really good sense to them.
Quick.
Yes, and it has to be things that I've said before. So one thing that I've said many times before to our back line would be, and our front line would be, scan their line. Now, scan their line, that sounds somewhat vague. Like, if I asked anybody in here to tell me what that means, very few people in here would know exactly what I'm talking about. But those players that I'm talking to know what I'm saying.
You've said it so many times, I understand.
We've prepared for it. So when was the best time to prepare them for understanding that language? Not during the game. Not during the game.
Yeah, you can't throw it at them like that. And I'll add this too, and I think this is where a lot of people get this misconception. Like, because even in youth, you have coaches that joystick, right? And I think there can be some benefit of joysticking. Is parents and even coaches forget that players see this. We, coaches and parents, see this.
Mm-hmm.
We get the 180 view of the whole sideline, and the player that's in the middle of the field, they get this tunnel vision, so to speak, of this small snippet of vision, which is why when you just brought up the whole point of scan your line, that requires them to be checking to see what's around them in the awareness. The players, correct me if I'm wrong, but the players that have the highest potential, potentially, are the ones that are constantly aware and able to pick apart their environments or their surroundings, I guess I should say. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, your brain's always going to beat your legs. Your brain works a lot faster. Yeah. It can process a lot more things than your legs can.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've seen from kids is, like, in our environment, I'll say, hey, from the sideline, I'll tell a kid, hey, look at this. And they'll say, well, coach, I saw this from this part of the field. Like, this will be like a halftime talk. I'll be like, hey, don't forget, you got Ethan on the right. You can switch it to him. Hey, but coach, I saw Abraham making the run. Mm-hmm. And it's like, then as a coach, you go, oh, I didn't really think about that because I'm seeing this, mm-hmm. and they're seeing this. Mm-hmm. So I just think, again, for parents, I think that's so important. And I love what you said, like, during the game is not the time to talk. So I want to get to that part where you said the first 10 to 15 minutes you talked about observing.
Yeah, I've got time for more. My phone's going to die.
Okay. So real quick, you talked about observing. During that first 10 to 15 minutes. How often are you actually throwing an instruction out there, if ever?
In that first 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Again, it would be something like what I just told you.
Right.
You know? And again, I think that the more fun part, fun and nerve-wracking, I guess, because you got to win, is watching that first 5 and 10 minutes and seeing if they can figure out, like, is someone on the pitch gonna say, guys, we haven't scanned the line, man. Like, what are we doing? Right. Look at where they are. Look at that. Like, you know what to do. So, like, is part of why you need to be quiet too, is because it's their chance to show you what they've learned, but it's also their chance to step up and execute those things without you. So again, if time has gone on again for 15 minutes and nobody has figured out that this team is playing like the highest line in the world but has no pressure on the ball, then like, yeah, like I'm going to get up and I'm going to say something, but again, it's going to be brief, right, and it's going to be concise, and it's going to be in language that they understand.
Straight to the point. No joysticking here.
No,
it's been prepared.
It's all about preparation, man. It's all about preparation. It's so important.
Yeah, and I like the same thing to parents and players, because I'm like, you're not getting to Coach Safe's level or above that if you're lucky, like Josh did, if you're not prepared. Mm-hmm. So I just think people need to understand that, you know, and I always tell parents the same thing, like, you have to let your kids figure this stuff out. If you're not letting them figure it out, they won't get to your environment or better, because they don't have the problem solving skills to take care of situations that arise. And like, this is something my dad said when he was coaching previously. He was like, he would tell his parents, because they would do a lot of joystick coaching. He's like, if you want your child coming to you for the rest of your life, continue to solve their problems on the field and tell them what to do.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh shit, that actually makes a lot of sense. I should probably shut my mouth. Mm-hmm. So it's just interesting, man. So I'll let you go, because I don't want your phone to shut off on you in the middle of this call. But we'll do another one soon, I'm sure. And let's keep it rolling, bro. I think people are enjoying this and getting hopefully value from this, guys. If you're getting value from this, please make sure you let us know, because you know we're doing this to try and help you guys. I don't need to do this. He don't need to do this for sure. He's got way more important things to worry about than come on Instagram Live and share some knowledge. So I really thank you for your time, bro, and keep us going.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and yeah, just happy to do it, and hopefully we can help some people. I know that there are a lot of parents out there that are wanting to do the right thing and do the most effective thing. And yeah, man, I mean, the most that we can help those, and then obviously players, the youth players as well. And the more that we can help those people, the better. And reach out to me anytime. Reach out to Kyle. This is what he does, and I'm available whenever I'm available. I'm always happy to be a help as well.
And don't worry, guys, we are posting this, so it'll be up momentarily. I'm going to work on getting them to YouTube, because people keep asking for them on YouTube. I'll make sure that I post these on YouTube as well. I think it's good for everybody. So thank you so much, Coach Safe, and we'll talk soon.
Brother. Appreciate it. Talk soon.
Bye.